Hi, thank you for joining me for today's live reading of Ashali and the Blue Horseman by Jordan Elizabeth, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. The Blue Horseman Kills Crime in Engelbert. Ashali slapped the newspaper down on the counter. Based on the picture of the superhero, chiseled 8-pack, tribal tattoo across his right pec trailing to his armpit, the headline should have read, Blue Horseman steals hearts and kills crime. He was shirtless, too, revealing all of his manly glory. The black and white photograph even showed a bit of wispy hair traveling from his belly button into his waistband of his low-cut spandex. Superheroes usually wore body-flowing spandex. His face was covered by a mask. So, let me get this straight. Ashali swirled on the bar stool to meet her best friend's gaze. The dude fights some bad guys, sees the camera crew, and strips? He wants girls to drop their panties reading the front page? Miranda snorted into her whiskey. Isn't that how you fight? She skimmed the article. 5 bank robbers with machine guns? I don't fight bad guys. Ashali pushed the newspaper as far across the bar as she could reach. The older man sitting on her left spared it a glance before continuing a game on his cell phone. Miranda leaned her elbow against the sticky bar and grinned around the dark establishment. Time to pick our guy of the night. She pulled a tube of lip gloss from her purse and smeared it over her lips. No. Ashali sipped her red wine, whatever kind of wine it was. The bartender had tossed out a bunch of names she didn't recognize, and Ashali had said, just give me the cheapest. The more she drank it, the more it made her stomach feel queasy. She hated the sluggish way alcohol always made her feel. Miranda slapped her arm. Come on, sweet cakes, that's why you're here. Spring break, baby. She whooped. A few guys at the pool table glanced their way. Engelbert City is not exactly the hottest spring break spot, is it? So far, she'd seen dark city streets and rats. Lots of rats. Granted, they were in the subway when she saw the rats, but they left an impression. Miranda rolled her heavily coated eyes. We're still in Florida. Ashali kept her mouth shut about pointing out they were hours from the beach. It was hot and the air was sticky, just like the bar and the stool, and even her glass felt sticky. You know you're having a good time, Miranda said. You're loving it here. She leaned her head against Ashali's shoulder. You can thank me for pushing you to come. Thank you, Ashali said. It was Miranda's hometown in Florida, Ashali's hometown in New York City, where she would sit alone, or going somewhere else alone. Engelbert was only for a week, and she wasn't alone. She actually had a best friend here. No problem. Now watch my moves. Miranda winked before sliding off her stool and sauntering toward a group of guys sitting on a circular table. They wore suits without ties, the top buttons undone, as if they'd swung by for work after work for a drink. And a date, if Miranda had her way. Ashali finished her wine and smacked her lips at the weird taste it left. Alcohol always left her feeling coated and unclean. Another one? The bartender smiled at her from his manicured black beard. It went great with his man bun. Water, please, with lemon. She nudged the glass toward him. He took it without an expression, returning her drink and the receipt. She opened her purse for cash and glanced at her cell phone. The periodic text from her dad flashed on the screen. She wrinkled her nose. From her dad's assistant. Her father couldn't take the time to check in on her, so poor Gina had to. Ashali tossed the bills on top of the receipt and sent a quick answer back. Doing great. Loving vacation. Miranda is awesome. If it was her mom checking in, she would have sent a photo with a big fake smile, but Gina and her dad didn't care about pictures. Sighing, Ashali tucked her phone away and nursed her ice water. Her dad was probably having a fit that she hadn't told him until that morning when she got on the plane with Miranda that she was heading to Engelbert instead of home. I'm 18. I can do what I want. Of course you can, a smooth male voice said at her shoulder. That's why you're going to let me buy you a drink. Ashali bit back a groan. This would make the third guy to hit on her since arriving at the bar. Miranda might go for it all she wanted, but Ashali? Nah. She turned her head to smile at him. No thanks, I like water. Saliva dried in her mouth. The guy was drop-dead gorgeous. Her jaw almost unhinged. The lights in the ceiling sent blue highlights across his jet-black hair. Soft waves curled around his ears and the nape of his neck. That hair should be illegal on a man. He slid onto the stool Miranda had vacated. That's cool. I like water too. He lifted 2 fingers to the bartender. And second water here. He lowered his voice, making it husky and sexual. With lemon. How Ashali wanted to be that lemon. No, she wanted him to squeeze the lemon juice onto her belly and lick it off. She jerked her attention to her blue fingernails so he wouldn't see her salivate. I'm Jase. Ashali, she muttered. Ashali, he seemed to taste her name. I don't like drinking in public, she blurted out. I like to keep in charge at all times. He chuckled low. I limit myself to one glass. Keep my wits about me. He was probably playing her, feeding her a line to make her more comfortable. I like your accent, he said. New York? You sound like a friend of mine. She ran her fingers through her hair before remembering she braided it after landing. The strands caught, pulling loose. Great, now she looked even more of a fess. Yeah, New York. The city? Sort of, that's where my dad lives. I spent quite a few years in the city. Loved it. My parents were from here, so I figured I'd come back. The place needed me. His water arrived. The bartender set a straw down, but Jace drank straight from the glass. Something about that was way too sexy. Miranda was right. She was boyfriend deprived. Ashali looked away again. This random stranger in a bar wasn't boyfriend material. Are you here with anyone? Jase asked. Her skin prickled. My best friend. She's right there. Ashali had no idea where Miranda had gone to, but she pointed in the general direction. Good. It's not a good idea to hang around bars in a city you aren't familiar with. My friend's from here. She wasn't sure if he was concerned or sketchy. He drank more water and turned on the stool to angle away from her, as if giving her space. His bicep bulged under a plain black t-shirt, with a V-neck and the slightest whisper of chest hair. A small scar showed near his elbow. Leather cuffs bound his wrists and one finger sported a silver ring. Jase grinned at her and held up the hand with the ring. It's a posy ring. It says, "You are my heart," in French. My mom gave it to my dad after they got engaged. She didn't like the idea of him being the only one to give a ring. That's really sweet. We both sipped our waters while rock music blared from old speakers and people laughed around us. What brings you to Engelbert? Jase hooked his thumb at the newspaper, hoping for a glimpse of the Blue Horseman. Please, I'm over superheroes. Come on, chicks love superheroes, he nudged her with his elbow, and she laughed. If you dress up like this dude, I'm kicking your ass to the curb. Not into role play. Got it. He made an invisible check mark in the air, and she laughed again. I'm on spring break. My friend wanted to come home to see her family, so she dragged me with her. Dragged. Okay, you don't want to be here. You'd rather be in Miami? Never been. I would rather be at school. Book nerd, huh? He faced her again and leaned his elbow on the bar. She found herself leaning toward him. Don't tell anyone, but I totally am. I get high off books. They even gave me orgasms. She expected a cheesy line like, let me give you an orgasm and see how it compares. Instead, he threw back his head and laughed so hard his shoulders shook. It was refreshing to have someone laugh with her instead of at her. I go to Hamilton College, she continued. When I said school, I meant the boarding school. I went to this private school from kindergarten until I graduated. It was upstate and it was awesome. There were even horses. I've heard girls like horses. Hey, it was nice seeing horses that didn't have to drag carriages through Central Park. I finished my water while he drank his, and we smiled at each other over the rims. Other girls flocked over, bumping into him by accident. A few asked for his name. He brushed each one off to keep his attention on Ashali. When one girl shoved her cleavage bared in a crocheted halter, he edged her aside to ask, "What are you studying in college?" English. All the old masters. I'm not sure what I want to be when I graduate, so I'll probably just be a professor. I love how a campus becomes its own world. I'd be happy living on a campus. That would make me feel like I was living in a bubble. So he didn't always agree with her. He swirled his cup and made the ice clink. I like exploring the world. If I went to college, it would be to study history. I can see that. Studying in the library, finally finding the answer to what you were looking for? He chuckled. I'd rather be out in the field. If I had to pick a career, I'd be an archaeologist. I love it when they find some artifact or some city they never knew existed. Are you in college? Not right now. Maybe someday. I had to take over the family business and I don't have a lot of studying time. Jase shrugged. I think you'd make a good archaeologist. You sound so passionate about it. His eyes had glowed, and he looked off at the expensive bottles behind the counter with a glaze she recognized from Miranda's expression. Miranda looked like that when she talked about fashion design, the career her parents didn't want her to pursue. Hey, he cocked his head at her. You want to come back to my place? What? She tightened her grip around her glass. I'm not trying to hook up with you. I want to show you some things my parents brought back from overseas. They're really into archaeology. I guess that's where I got my passion from. I... Hey, girl. Miranda leaned against Ashali's side. Who's the hottie? Ashali's cheeks burned. This is Jase. Jase something or other who helped run the family business, whatever that was. You must be the friend. He held out his hand. I was just inviting your girl back to my place. He flashed a smile of straight white teeth. Miranda squealed. Ash, you are totally going. A big part of her wanted to. He was cute and sweet, and the conversation was easy. She'd never had a one-night stand before. Would she want to? She wasn't staying in Engelbert. She wasn't even staying in Florida. She was never seeing him again after they parted ways. She wouldn't even have to stay all night. After they finished, she could get an Uber to take her to Miranda's. You're worried about your dad? Miranda held out her hand. We'll switch phones. I'll answer Daddy Dearest whenever he checks in. That was crazy. He would check in, though, especially with her out of the state, and he was probably tracking her phone, too, being the paranoid maniac that he was. He would freak out if he saw her going to a random dude's house. If he saw her going to Miranda's house, it would make sense. Ashali pressed her phone into Miranda's hand and took the offered cell phone instead. Okay, Jase, I'll go back to your place with you. Chapter 2. Jase opened the door to his sleek black convertible. He waited for the girl from the bar to make the usual oohs and ahs over his Lamborghini and maybe melt all over the seat. But this girl offered him a polite smile and sat in the passenger seat. Her body was stiff, all rigid angles. Nervous. It was cute. He rubbed her shoulder to make her relax before shutting the door and made a mental note that sports cars didn't impress Ashali. He bounded into the driver's seat and shut his door. You want the hood up or down? Sometimes the girls liked it up to keep from mussing their hair. She provided a tight smile. Down. How small her voice sounded. She plucked at the side pocket on her green camouflage pants. Hey. Jase brushed his hand over her knee, careful to keep the contact quick, friendly. I can drop you off at home if you want, or we can pick up ice cream. I know a spot out of the city where we can watch the stars. She wasn't all over him like the girl from last week. By the time he'd turned on the car, she was in his lap trying to stick her tongue down his throat. Not that he was complaining about last week's girl, but Ashali was refreshing in an innocent way. She reminded him of a few girls he'd dated back before all the shit went down. They had gone for ice cream or to that field on a hill, and the date had been perfect, just like that. It's okay, her voice squeaked, and she ducked her head. The thick waves of her hair spilled over her shoulders to hide her face. In the bar, the yellow tresses had flashed with streaks of crimson, but in the darkness of his car, the hair seemed to glow white. Down it is. He revved the engine and pressed the button to lower the top. Cool pants, by the way. Thanks. She kept fidgeting with her pocket as he pulled out of the bar's parking lot. Most girls wore dresses that were both too tight or too short, or they had short shorts that counted more as panties. Not that he was complaining, Jase chuckled. It was just cool to see a girl who looked like she was ready to dance and go for a hike. She tipped her head back and the streetlights flashed over her face. They reflected off her glasses. She had those cute metal frames that gave her a bit of a sexy professional look instead of those big, chunky frames all the girls had now. He hated bumping his face on those huge glasses. Traffic slowed until he rounded a corner. They passed people walking along the sidewalk on their cell phones. Couples stood near mailboxes and kiosks laughing. He turned on the music but kept it low enough that they could still talk. Breaking Benjamin? She blinked at him. I haven't heard this band in ages. My go-to, he said. How old are you? The question must have embarrassed her. She flipped her head away to look at the skyscrapers they passed. 19. You? He idled the car at a traffic light. She was in college, so she was legal, right? I just turned 18. I graduated early. I sort of skipped a grade. My boarding school didn't really do grades, just classes, and I did a lot of extra classes during the summer. Overachiever? Now she picked at her black studded belt, more like I didn't want to go home. He nodded and continued down another few blocks to the next traffic light. Looking for a glimpse of the Blue Horseman? She made a noise that might have been a snort. I'm sick of superheroes. That was a first. How can you be sick of superheroes? Because they're so good. Doesn't that ever get on your nerves? Some of them even refuse to kill people. It's like, dude, come on. If you killed the guy, he wouldn't keep breaking out of prison to terrorize people all over again. Jase chuckled. The Blue Horseman kills people. She lifted her hands. To be fair, I don't know that much about the Blue Horseman. I don't remember ever hearing of him until, last year. I'm just saying that I'm sick of hearing superheroes prattle on and on whenever the media gets a hold of them about making the world a better place. Talking about stopping crimes isn't going to make people stop committing crimes. But here she flashed him the smile that had won him over in the bar. You go on worshiping your city's personal superhero, who, by the way, doesn't even have superpowers. Jase outright laughed. The guy kicks ass anyway. I'll give him that. He gets the job done. He drove over the bridge, leaving the city of Engelbert behind. The noise of traffic, sirens, and voices faded the further away the convertible carried them. She tipped her head back again to enjoy the breeze on her face. What are your plans for Florida? Whatever Miranda wants to do. She said she's going to take me to some historic sites, and she'll probably try to catch some of that Blue Horseman action. She's obsessed. He almost wanted to tag along on one of her historic outings, but he kept his mouth shut. A new song started, and she sang along under her breath. Tagging along with the tourist was good for someone with free time, and he only got that once a week, and he'd hate to give her ideas. This couldn't be anything more than one night of fun. Then again, she was going back to New York. She wouldn't expect anything from him. They left the bridge, and traffic thinned even more. The river passed by on their left, forests and hills to their left. Florida's beautiful, she said, in a hot, sticky kind of way. New York's nice too, in a cold, rainy kind of way. What do you do for a living, Jase? I got roped into running the family business. Oh, that's cool. Is it a car dealership? No, he turned off the main road and the woods thickened on either side. I thought because of the expensive car. My parents owned an insurance company. Well, now I own it. I don't exactly run it. There are guys that do that for me. Bitterness crept up and he shoved it down. Company problems weren't for his dates. They weren't exactly problems. It was more like he didn't have enough time to get into the daily nitty-gritty bits, so he left that to the big guys who'd worked for his parents from the start. Jase rolled his shoulders. Are you hot? You want the air on? This is my air. She lifted her hands overhead and grinned. I haven't been in a convertible in ages. I forgot how much I love them. My car's a little pathetic thing. I wanted something no one would notice. That was a weird comment. He rolled some words around his tongue to pry deeper, but the forest opened to the gate around the estate. What is this place? She leaned forward to see better through the bars. Jase typed into the passcode, and the gate opened. Welcome to the Grim Reaper's headquarters. What? He shrugged. My last name's Grimshaw, so that's why I always called the place. Floodlights illuminated the front yard. He drove around the circular driveway, and the cherub fountain in the meridian sprouted water from a pitcher. The mansion of yellow brick towered over them in all its old-fashioned glory. My great-grandfather ran a tobacco plantation here, Jase said. When my parents added on the wings, they wanted to keep it with the colonial theme. He parked the car and went around to let Ashali out. She gaped at the giant white pillars and crystal chandeliers that his mother had insisted on for the front porch. A bit overkill in his opinion, but they'd never asked for his opinion. You live here? Like you're a billionaire? Millionaire, he corrected. But who's counting the pennies?